Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. In today's episode, we're talking all about inner game and personal development and how that flows through to your relationships. We touch on the power of working on your inner self, the 5 love languages, and communicating boundaries and expectations. Now let's get into it.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast, everyone. Tonight, our guest is Barry, who is a human behaviour archaeologist based in Bali. He's here to facilitate sustainable heart-based change that affects all aspects of life in a really profound way. He's also the CEO and founder of The Game Changers, where they have helped hundreds of businesses around the world to scale and grow by mastering their inner game. Barry is also the host of the Comeback Game podcast, where he chats to guests about the ups and downs and successes towards greatness while inspiring entrepreneurs all over the world. He's joining us today to dig deep on all things inner game and how it shows up in our relationships. Welcome to the podcast, Barry.
Thanks so much for having me.
So Barry, can you just explain a little bit about what inner game is?
Yeah. What I realized years ago was that there's a lot of people teaching content strategy in business and what I would say is the outer game. And what I started to realize through my own trials and errors and many, many failures is that we have this thing called the inner game, which is essentially a combination of, you could say, mindset. But I think it's so much more than that. Like, it's a connection between spirit, soul, mind, body, and being, right? It's us, ourselves. And what I started to notice is that, and realize, is that people don't have business problems. People have personal problems that get expressed through the businesses. Like, my common belief is that we're walking through life almost as a projector, and life is the screen. And so the way that we occur with life or interact with life is a reflection of what's going on internally to us. So we never see life as life is, we see life as we are. And so I believe our inner game is the way that we are showing up in life, like whole and complete, perfect and yet unfinished. And the outer game is more so things outside of us, strategy, tactics, interactions with others and so forth.
Yeah, so you must have gone through an experience or a series of experiences that had you come to that realization. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh, every day, still now. I've been in this personal development space. God, I've been in business now for more than half my life. Over 18 years, I've been running my own businesses and companies. And, it was interesting because I thought business was the greatest kind of spiritual journey we can go on. And when I mean spiritual, there's many different ways we could take that. But spiritual in terms of learning so much about oneself, like far beyond, the paradigms of how we brought up. But then I started to meet and attract women that I cared about and realized that was a whole nother level of challenge than business itself. So for me, some of the core things was, I went into this business at 17 years old and I had the clear focus that I wanted to create something that provided me with income and time so that when I eventually had a family and started a family, I could be more there for my kids than my father was for me growing up. I grew up, my dad was always working. He was doing what he felt he needed to support myself, my 3 brothers, and my mum. But yet all we really wanted was him around, not so much fancy clothes on our back. And maybe I'd be saying the opposite right now if we grew up with him always around and having no clothes on our back, right? But we can only kind of go off the experience we had. And the funny thing is that 6 years in that business, I first entered the business by an employer that treated me like absolute dirt. And I was like, I need to leave. I need to do something else. Never thought I'd be in business, but one day I woke up and decided to run out of the paper. And anyway, 6 years later, I woke up and I realized that not only had I created the same situation for my kids that I had growing up, but it was worse. So during that period of time, I met a woman, had a couple of accidental kids, and accidental is intentional in saying that, is that both were conceived under birth control, different birth control, both of them, like they were absolute miracles and still are today. But I was like, how the hell could I have entered this business with the end in mind, which so many great gurus talk about? And yet not only did I not create that end, I created what I was trying to avoid. And that was what really led me down to starting to understand human behavior, psychology, and really a whole another world, because prior to that, I dove deep into spirituality and energy and Reiki and meditation, dove deep down that. And I was like, how can I be so spiritual and so connected to my representation of God, yet still be attracting such horrible and horrific circumstances to where, I bankrupted, lost, friends, lost family, lost all this sort of stuff when I was trying to avoid that.
Mammoth journey.
Yeah.
So what was the very first, or I guess the most impactful personal development experience that you had that kind of unlocked this journey for you?
That was it, to be honest. My partner at the time saying, hey, I'm leaving and taking the kids and I'm moving to the other side of the country because I can't do this anymore. Love you, but I need some support and you're not it. You're not there for us. And me dropping them off, going back to business and realizing that I didn't have a business. I had a job. I had a multi-million-dollar job right then that I couldn't step out of for a second without the thing falling apart. And I guess the question I asked is I want to work out how I effed my life up so bad. How did I manage to end up so in such a screwed up position where I'd lost my partner, my kids, business was falling over. We were financially doing well. We were growing ridiculously fast, but it was all relying on me being a linchpin of that growth.
And you've since gone on to work with hundreds of business owners who are having those personal problems that are showing up in their business. What starts to happen when they flip from the outer game to the inner game?
I could share so many stories that would probably have your audience going, that's bullshit, that's complete woo-woo. But after so many stories, it's you just start to know it to be true. Stories where clients have jumped on the phone and said, I can't attract my ideal employee. Everyone keeps leaving me or stealing from me. And we're having a change work session. And 2 days later, they've hired this incredible human to work in the business who's still there today and flourishing. Clients who have come in and said, hey, my business is going backwards, my cash, my money, had a session and 2 days later ringing up saying, I don't know how, I just closed $250,000 worth of deals, out of nowhere. Things just show up as we shift that internal perspective, I guess is what it is. Where life is always there, the opportunities are there. There's the same amount of opportunities right now, even with COVID, as there was 2 months ago. It's that perspective of what COVID means or what it's doing or us consuming way too much social media that's changing our ability to act on what the external stimulus is showing us, right? The opportunity is always there. It's just, are we choosing to focus on opportunity or are we choosing to focus on scarcity? Focusing on what we've got or focusing on what we haven't got.
I know that for me, my journey with personal development was, I guess, one of the first key lessons that I really learned, and it sounds so basic, is that life is happening for me, not to me. And that differentiator between am I at cause in my life or am I at effect in my life?
Absolutely.
And that can be such a rough pill to swallow. When you have that real profound realization, oh fuck, this is me. This is all me. I am accountable for absolutely everything that is or is not in my life. That's I guess a big thing to kind of switch to flick.
Yeah.
And obviously you've helped lots of business owners do that. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I guess, what that looks like, how they show up? Yeah,
it's funny because it's a pill that although you may swallow it the first time you realize it, it keeps coming back and it becomes harder to swallow. A week ago, I nearly passed out trying to take my vitamins before bed, and I tried to put too many in at once and choked. And I was there in the kitchen choking, going, do I wake my boys up to try to jump on my chest, or do I just sit with this and work through what's going on? And the point I'm making is they're the same pills I've had every night for months, right? And so we can have that realization, but we get challenged around that. We get challenged around how much responsibility we're willing to take for what we created. And unfortunately, when people first have that realization or they come to terms with it, they start diving down that path, they've often got to undo a lot of paradigms, a lot of things they've created their whole life. And that can be challenging because we have so much of our identity wrapped around what those things mean to us. Yet, if we can truly find a way to step into heart consciousness and follow intuition, we can start to trust and understand that everything's always happening for us, not to us, as you mentioned. But that doesn't mean that what you get is what you want. And that's the biggest misconception is people think, well, if I follow my heart, if I follow my intuition, if I take responsibility, everything would be smooth sailing. That's bullshit, right? Like you will get what you need to become the highest version of you. And for me, absolutely, that was a business that bankrupted for 1.3 million, a business that relied on me to be there every single day, a relationship that broke apart. Like everything that I had, I can look back at right now and see the blessings, the gifts that was in that, because without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. Absolutely not.
I think that's a trap that people fall into, not just in business, but in relationships, where they go like, oh, if this is my person, then it should be fairy tale easy. Like, and if it's not that, then it must not be right.
Yeah. That's such a bullshit paradigm. And even furthermore is comparing your current relationship to your parents, because let's be honest, like things were very different when they were growing up than what they are right now. Like look at the divorce rate now compared to what it was. That's such an old paradigm. And I've been saying a lot to people, like you've got to question what you believe. Like anything you've stopped questioning is a belief, and it's a potential huge sabotage that's holding you back. Right? You got to be willing to question everything. And I don't know, like I think a relationship, I'm just going to say it, and I'm open to the hate, but I think a relationship that's like super smooth and super easy is one that lacks intimacy and vulnerability and probably amazing sex as well, because there is not that duality there. There's not that tension that's being created because things are just easy.
Yeah, and sometimes easy can kind of show up like it's disengagement. It's like just going to coast along with it because it's just easier and hassle-free to not acknowledge that thing that's not working.
Yeah.
Or that thing that I do actually really want from my relationship that I'm not getting.
Yeah. Conflict is good. Like we've been brought up in an environment, like in the schooling system, that it wasn't okay to make a mistake and it wasn't okay to ask for help. Conflict is good, and it's something that within my team, I'm constantly asking for that to come up, because if there's conflict, it means that people are actually sharing what they give a shit about, right? If there's not that conflict, and I don't mean like the unresourceful conflict where there's the martyrism and there's all the manipulation and the blame and all that other bullshit. Like I mean someone making a stand for what's really important to them. Like if you're not having those conversations, you don't have a real relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's just challenging the status quo as well, and actually questioning things, looking at things differently, and going, how can we do this better? How can we improve? And what's next for us, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, so a big part of I guess shifting that inner game is, in my experience, has been about identifying and then establishing boundaries and going, I didn't know that I'd been letting people pass a boundary because I'd never put it up, I'd never acknowledged it, or I'd never created that space for myself. Obviously, in relationships, that sometimes they're not fixed, sometimes they can move a little bit. And we're in this weird space at the moment with lots of people who have just had quite a drastic flip to their lifestyle, and their boundaries, both physically and emotionally, have probably had to shift. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience with boundaries and establishing them and revisiting them?
Yeah, damn, such a good question and so relevant, because I honestly think that like 12 months ago, I didn't have any boundaries. I had boundaries, but I wasn't aware of the boundaries. And even when they were crossed, I wasn't aware that that was what was happening. It was just showing up for me as frustration. I'm like, why am I frustrated with this person right now? And it took a long time for me to have this realization. I was like, wow, like my boundaries were taken away from me when I was young, not through any fault, other than I believe that was part of my journey to learn what I need to learn. And once I realized that, I was like, wow, I actually haven't respected other people's boundaries because I haven't been aware of my own boundaries. So if I'm not aware of my own boundaries, how could I respect the boundaries of one another? How can I respect what they needed when I'm not even respecting what I need because it wasn't something I knew was needed? So I think boundaries are super important. This is where we need to be a little bit careful entering relationships, because people they go through this honeymoon period where they're not really showing up as all of them. And so when eventually like time goes by, that starts to be relaxed a little bit, the true them starts to come out. It brings a lot of conflict up, because it's like, well, you're not who I fell in love with, or who's this person coming through? And they're seeing you as like evolving into some beast, rather than the fact that that's who you've always been. You've just done a really good job of suppressing it. And one thing I see in relationships is around, like, I think codependency is okay. And what I mean by that is, like, I want to have a partner that I want to spend every second of every day with. Like, that's a relationship that I personally want. The unhealthy part of that is that when I do that, in sacrificing my own needs, in sacrificing me having time by myself, first and foremost, to make sure that I'm always pointed towards my true north, and spending time with other mates and other guys and other masculine energy so I can come back to who I'm at my core. And that's where I think this whole term codependency is kind of thrown around. It's like, I want to spend every day with my partner. I just want to also have the boundaries to be able to step back and go, I need some time for me right now. I'm processing some stuff. Yeah. It's creating conflict. It's bringing up stuff in the relationship. It's my stuff. Let me go and process. I'll come back when I'm ready to let you back into my space.
And I think that what you just touched on is really interesting, because obviously at the start of a relationship, it's new and it's exciting and you've got all these things that are going on in your life, and then something has to give so that you can invest in that relationship. So you stop, with spending as much time with your friends or as much time on your hobbies or as much time on your business or your career. And then, as the relationship progresses, you hit that point where you're like, oh, I need to claim some of that back. I need to start reinforcing some of those boundaries and, reinvest in those relationships or those friendships or those networks.
Because you've diluted yourself down to incorporate this other big part of your life, but you've kind of end up having diluted yourself or losing parts of your life as well, I guess.
Yeah.
So do you have, touching on that boundaries piece, obviously there's some physical boundaries that people might be navigating at the moment where they're now both working from home or, the physical space that they're in isn't conducive to, them both being in it all the time. Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'll say. I want to go back just a half a step, and that is that, like, the moment that you think that you know your partner, the relationship's dead. Because we are human beings, and if we're not green and growing and evolving, we're ripe and rotting. Like, look at nature. Nature's such a perfect representation of us. Like, we are a part of nature, right? So the moment that we see our partner and we think that we know them, the relationship's dead because we're not giving them a chance to evolve and grow. Tying back into what you said before, Sammy, is around, like, boundaries are going to change. But the important part of that is to number one, like, work on self first before anything. Work on getting yourself to a place where you're happy, you're in love with who you are and who you show up as, because then you can take that and spread that to the world. And also you start to have that sensory awareness if you're starting to get a bit out of alignment and what you might need to do to correct that. The next part of that is to be able to communicate. Hey, babe, like, I've really enjoyed hanging out and spending a lot of time. It's been great. I'm also noticing for me right now, I'm just being called to hang out with my guy mates a little bit more. Like, if it's cool, I'm just going to start to, maybe spend a half a day a weekend or a night a week or whatever doing that, and communicate that and share why that's important. And you should have a partner that's willing to support you. It might bring some stuff up to start with, but that stuff that brings up in them is not necessarily your stuff to deal with. That's their insecurities. That's their boundaries. And this is where we can get so entangled in a relationship, is not knowing whose stuff is who and trying to fix the other person's, which ultimately ends up being completely entangled in a codependent relationship and not processing your stuff that's there to be processed in the relationship.
Yeah, or turning their stuff into a project of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're coaches, like, it's very easy to do that. In terms of what's happening right now, like, one thing that I've been sharing with our clients, we have a lot of couples that are clients, is like, just realize that you're in a stress stimulated environment right now. And so your perception of what's happening is not reality. It's one part of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle. Like, have conversations that you're aware that this stuff might come up, but it doesn't change the fact that you love each other. It doesn't change the fact that you're in a relationship. It just means that you're both dealing with a lot, like financial stresses or having kids at home or working around each other's space, and find a way to support each other. And hey, like, I'll have the kids on Saturday, you get out for half a day. I'll have the kids on Sunday, you get out for half a day, and find a way that you can also have time for you. Set boundaries with the kids to where, you know what, like, Friday night's mummy and daddy's night. Like, you guys got to go to bed early, take a book, watch a movie, take your iPad. But from 6 p.m., like, you're quiet. This is time for us to work on our relationship, and set those boundaries up front.
And even if it's not kids, it's everything else. It's like, okay, cool. Well, this is going to be our time. We're going to carve out. Neither of us are laptop closed. Neither of us are working. Neither of us are jumping on FaceTimes with our mates, like, still carving out that time. Yeah, even if it's you're not going anywhere at the moment, like, but consciously showing up for that dedicated time to be together and not just, indulge in Netflix, and actually really be present with one another.
Relationships, like obviously I work with a lot of business owners, but I do work with a lot of people in relationships too. And, like, relationships are no different than business. Like, if you want a great business, you need to constantly work in the business. Yet, like, there's this whole thing that happens. People find the one, and they get married, they just stop trying. And they wonder why their relationship breaks down. Like they stop creating intimacy, they stop creating experiences, they stop, finding ways to build and work in the relationship. But like I think anything worthwhile having in life is worthwhile putting consistent action towards. It shouldn't be working your relationship, but there should be constant attention that's put onto like investing in the growth of that.
Yeah, that's how we came up with the name Fuel Collective, because the idea being that if we were a collective of human beings and we were all fueling ourselves and our relationships consciously, what would that do? So Fuel Collective. Hey, something that you touched on there was around like communicating with your partner. I've heard you talk a little bit about love languages in the past, and Nathan and I are huge Gary Chapman love languages fans. Do you want to just share a little bit about your experience with love languages and how you've seen that transform relationship?
Yeah, it's such an easy tool, but such a significant shift. Yeah. And for me, what I didn't realize before love languages is that I was showing up and giving to a relationship the way that I most like to receive. Right? It's that whole thing, like treat others as you like to be treated is what we've been told.
Yeah, we were told over and over again.
Treat others as you like to be treated. And so it's been ingrained to us from a young age. It's like, well, no, treat others how they want to be treated. And so love languages allows you to understand, like my partner's love language is, quality time or physical touch. So using that, because essentially all it is, once again, is a filtering system in how we interact with the outside world. So I have a filtering system that says physical touch is my number one. So touch me and like I'm all yours, like my attention is there, right? Whereas like buying me stuff, it just doesn't have the same meaning to me. I don't receive love that way. Like my filtering system doesn't pick it up that way. And so identifying what your partner's love language is and what your love language is allows you to communicate in them in a way they can hear. Otherwise, it's like a couple being in a relationship, one speaking Mandarin and one speaking English, right? They're both speaking a language, but that language is not connecting in a form of communication.
And you might pick up a few words here and there, but you're not going to, receive the whole message in that same manner either.
So true, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as an analogy. It's like we've all got these 5 individual cups, and if your partner's only ever pouring into the one cup that you don't drink from, you're always going to be thirsty.
Love
you can
that.
learn to drink from to fill up the cup that they actually drink from. And sometimes those things like, words of affirmation may not be something that comes very naturally to you. But if your partner doesn't hear, like, I love you, I'm so proud of you, I think it's great when you did this thing, or, I really admire this quality or that quality in you, then they're going to forever feel like that you don't love them. But yeah, you've got to, I guess, work through that. If hugging or cuddling or touching in public isn't something that comes naturally to you, learning to speak that language can be challenging too.
And it could be a frustration. Like they could not enjoy words of affirmation, and that's your love language. So you give it to them, and for them, it's actually a turn off and driving them away. Yet it's coming from the purest intent in you, and that's where, once again, like communication is so important.
Yeah, and I know that Nathan and I have had that experience. Like my primary love language is gifts. So you saying like, I don't want people to buy me stuff. It's like, for me, I love it if someone's put real thought and care into picking out something. Like if Nate came home with a bottle of wine and was like, I was walking past this boutique, wine cellar place on the way home, and I saw this and I thought of you, like that would just melt me. Like,
or if I picked you a flower.
If you picked me a flower on the way home from the train station, I'd be in pieces. Like I'm all about that. But it works in the opposite way that, when I've spent so much time and energy and thought giving Nathan a gift, if he doesn't respond, I guess, in the same in a way that I'm expecting, or that he doesn't really treasure that item, it can be really detrimental to that relationship as well. So that's something that we've definitely had to learn. It's like, okay, if we're arguing or in conflict, not actively not touching Nathan is really, really painful. Like, so it's not
feeling you, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just like that the love language used positively, but it can also be really detrimental by taking it away.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like I think in relationship, like I want to give my partner everything that she wants and more, not at the detriment of myself, right? But the only way I can do that is to first understand what it is she actually wants.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well to understand that the way that you receive love and the way that you give love as well can be 2 different languages. And so, like, I my default might be words of affirmation, but that's actually not how I receive love either. So I think it's really important to actually look at yourself from both angles of how do I really like to receive love, but also what is my default for giving love, and then how does that relate to yourself as well, or your partner, and how best do they receive love? So
yeah, so for anyone who hasn't explored it, you can jump on and do a quiz. It's really quick. The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman.
Yeah.
So Barry, we've heard you talk a little bit about nonviolent communication. What on earth is that?
So I had a relationship where I was deeply and madly in love with this woman, but yet it just seemed like any time I opened my mouth, it would create conflict. And I remember growing up too, like my mum used to constantly nail me around the fact that it wasn't what I said, it's not what you say, it's the way that you say it. And, you know, I'm very much one that whenever I've got a problem or a challenge or a shortcoming, I'm like, cool, well, there's a solution for this. I just got to find someone who's overcome it. And I actually started seeing this woman, this tantric woman, not in a relationship, like seeing her as a practitioner.
Coaching capacity.
Yeah, coaching capacity. We did some tantric workshops. I was like, wow, this is really cool. Went and continued my ongoing learning. And she's like, oh, you want to check out nonviolent communication? And it was mind-blowing. And I was like, wow, I can really understand how, because I'm quite to the point, like I'm like, let's just get it done, say what needs to be said. It can be quite harmful to like a feminine essence or energy. And so going through the nonviolent communication, it kind of taught a 3-step process. Like the first thing to do is to share, like, what are you feeling? So it's like, oh, hey, I'm feeling a little bit sad right now with that comment that you shared, right? So it's not about them saying, hey, I can't believe you said that. There's no blame. There's no justification. It's very neutral language in terms of like, I'm expressing how I feel because of that. And my need for X wasn't being met. So it's like, hey, I'm feeling a bit sad right now when you respond that way because my need for connection not being met. So you're sharing what you're feeling in response to what's been said and what need of yours has not been met by that, which gives, you know, whereas a lot of people in relationship and in life in general are quite quick to blame or to point fingers. And I never had the intent, like my intent was always a pure intent, but it was just constantly creating this reaction in others around me.
Wow. What would you say what prompted you to do that? Obviously, you were saying that you were in conflict with your partner. You're like, there's something going on here. There's something going on here. How did you identify what it was that you needed to explore?
Well, look, I think everything can be resolved from communication. Like, I don't think there's a problem in the world that can't be resolved through communication. Like, think about it. Like anything. And there was an issue with the way that we were relating. Like what I was saying and what I was meaning were not a match, or at least what I was saying and what she was hearing,
or the way you're expressing it, or
was not a match, and it was creating conflict. And so I was like, okay, I could sit here and beat the drum of like, you need to change and listen to what I'm saying and feel what I'm sharing, or I could take responsibility that there may be something coming on from me in the way that what I'm feeling and what I'm expressing is a bit of misalignment. So is there a way I can work through that to where what I deliver is owned by me and my feeling, my experience, without trying to change them, to get some kind of calibration to start to mesh together a bit better?
Have you got some practices that you walk yourself through to kind of do that?
Not so much. Like, it's been really interesting this past 6 months, like the evolution of my relating with women and with partners. And I think the number one thing is actually vulnerability. That's been something that's been huge for me, like being able to fully show up and express all of who you are and what's going on. And you're either going to have a partner that meets you there or not. But it's better to find it out earlier than to be like years down the track and have someone that just can't see you and can't hold space for you and can't be in that environment. It's been such an interesting journey. But I think first and foremost, I think vulnerability is expressing what's there. Like, hey, I'm kind of feeling this right now. Like, not trying to deal with it on your own or feeling shamed or pushing it down or pretending it's not there, because that just builds up resentment and it builds up energy that ends up coming out in anger or frustration, right? And typically most couples can feel their partners very well. So in terms of practice, for me, like I meditate every day, do yoga regularly, breath work, but I think just constantly noticing when I'm in a relationship where I feel stuck or holding or there's some resistance, is to kind of lean into that and to express what's there for me.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what would be your number one tip for our listeners to bring into their relationships in maybe a daily practice or something like that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think absolutely everyone should listen to Understanding Women by Alison A. Armstrong and Keys to the Kingdom. They are revolutionary, and both partners listen to both of them. So women, it will help you to understand more about yourself, Understanding Women. Men, it'll be a game changer in Understanding Women, but vice versa. The Keys to the Kingdom is a game changer. So I think that's first and foremost. I think second is just to create a really good frame with your partner around how you're going to deal with things. So some advice might be that you rate your fights. Like after the fight's been finished and over, is to sit down and go, cool, like I feel that fight for me was kind of like an 8. Like, what was it for you? And rate the fight and give yourself some feedback. And cool, like what can we do better next time? Right? What
I
can we
love
do
that.
better?
That's so insightful. Like to do like a little rose analysis of like what went well, what didn't go well, what are our opportunities in that moment of conflict? How are we repairing after it? I like that.
Yeah. Because if nothing's changing, right? You're going to keep dealing with the same shit. And when life squeezes, especially like it is now, that stuff that hasn't changed, that stuff that's been unresolved just comes out in a far greater way.
Mm.
So I think ongoingly, like daily practice is sharing how you're feeling, asking your partner, man, ask your woman, how was your day? And then just shut up and listen, like allow her to dump and unload everything that's going on, not to fix it, not to change it. One thing that I found works really well is at the end of that is to say, cool, like, appreciate what you're sharing, acknowledge it. Out of all of that, is there anything you'd like me to keep or remember, or anything you'd like me to do with that? And actually asking like your woman or your partner, like, what would you like me to do with that? And the shift and transformation I've noticed in them has been huge. And women, like, appreciate your men. Like, men at their core want to be appreciated. So find things to appreciate them about, which helps further build their masculinity, helps further build them as the provider. And I don't mean like the old kind of school, they go out and earn the money and come back, but they have a role to play in the relationship, right? As women do, which women is more around feeling understood. Men is more around being appreciated. Like, you know, so many relationships are going down emasculation and manipulation, but I think spend time daily to work on your relationship.
Yeah, it's really great advice.
Yeah, I like that. We're going to implement that ranking leadership report, not in a competitive way, in an opportunity for growth way. But yeah, I think one of the best lessons that we ever learned about conflict was that you never use the word never, and you never use the word always. So it's not you never listen to me, or you always do that. So I know that if either of those words fall into one of our conflicts, then it's no good.
Yeah.
Gets a 0.
It gets a 0.
Gets a 0.
Room for improvement.
Yeah.
Hey, so Barry, thank you so much for joining us today. At Fuel Collective, we've got a couple of values to love life, so which is really about being intentional and aware of what it is that you're doing with your life and whether or not you're loving it. It's obviously to date forever, that being to date yourself, and also to continue actively dating your partner. And then the third one is to be the change. And what be the change for us means is about being the change in your own life and taking accountability for what you have influence over, but also being the change that you want to see in the world. So to say thank you for joining us today, we're going to give 10 days of tuition to some disadvantaged girls in Cambodia via our partnership with Buy One, Give One. I know you're a member as well, so I know you have some good understanding of how that project works and what magic we can create together by doing this and showing up and having a cool conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
So if people have loved what you've been talking about today, how should they connect with you?
Look, Instagram is probably where I share where I'm at right now. So it's Barry William Magliarditi. You can probably put my name somewhere. That's where I kind of share what's most raw and real. My other channels are very business specific. So you can find The Game Changers on YouTube, thegamechangers.com.au. We've also got a phenomenal podcast called The Comeback Game Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms as well.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.